Have you ever walked towards someone with complete confidence, only to realize their name has vanished from your mind? In that quiet moment, embarrassment rushes in, and you wonder what that forgotten name says about you. Maybe you remember the conversation, the laughter, the clothes they wore, even where you met. Yet the one detail society expects you to remember simply disappears. You smile anyway, hoping they never notice your hesitation. Perhaps you've become skilled at avoiding names altogether. You greet people with warm smiles, familiar phrases, or carefully timed questions that allow someone else to say their name first. It works often enough that almost nobody realizes the silent anxiety hiding underneath. Afterward, you replay the encounter in your head. You ask yourself why this keeps happening. Is your memory getting worse? Are you distracted? Or could there be something fundamentally wrong with the way your mind works? The strange part is that you can remember hundreds of song lyrics, childhood memories, movie scenes, passwords, and random facts without effort. Yet a simple name, spoken only moments earlier, slips away like water through your fingers. Most people dismiss this as absent-mindedness. They laugh about having a terrible memory and move on. But deep inside, many carry a quiet fear that forgetting names means they are careless, unintelligent, or simply not paying enough attention. What if that assumption is completely wrong? What if forgetting names is not merely a failure of memory, but a subtle clue pointing towards something much deeper inside the unconscious mind? Something that has been shaping your relationships long before you ever noticed it. Most people think forgetting names is a simple memory problem. They blame stress, age, poor concentration, or information overload. But that explanation barely scratches the surface. The truth is that memory is rarely just about storage. It is also about meaning. Your mind does not record every detail with equal importance. Long before you consciously decide what matters, the unconscious is already making that decision for you. It quietly filters experience, preserving what feels emotionally significant while allowing other pieces to fade into the background. That is why you can instantly remember the exact words that hurt you years ago, yet struggle to recall the name of someone you met yesterday. The brain is not behaving randomly. It is following priorities that often exist outside your awareness. Carl Jung believed that much of human behavior is guided by forces we do not consciously recognize. Beneath every ordinary habit lies an invisible pattern, quietly influencing attention, emotion, and memory. Sometimes, what appears to be forgetfulness is actually the unconscious directing your focus somewhere else entirely. The hidden enemy, then, is not poor intelligence, it is unconscious attention. We assume we are fully present during conversations, but much of the time, our inner world competes with the outer one. While someone is introducing themselves, another part of the mind may already be evaluating danger, acceptance, rejection, comparison, or belonging. Imagine attending a networking event. Someone extends their hand and says their name. Outwardly, you smile and respond politely. Inwardly, however, you are wondering whether they find you impressive, whether you sound confident enough, or whether you belong in the room at all. The conversation continues, but your attention never truly arrives. The same pattern appears in everyday life. A parent juggling responsibilities meets another parent at school. A student worries about making a good first impression. An employee enters a meeting focused on avoiding mistakes. Everyone hears the name, but their psychological energy is already invested elsewhere. This is where the mystery deepens. If forgetting names reflects where our unconscious attention truly lives, then every forgotten introduction may be revealing something far more personal than we ever imagined. So what hidden psychological need is quietly pulling your attention away before a memory even has the chance to form? To understand that question, we have to move beyond memory itself and into the architecture of the unconscious. This is where psychologists like Carl Jung, Alfred Adler, and Viktor Frankl offer a perspective that feels surprisingly modern despite being developed generations ago. Jung argued that the mind is never divided into isolated functions. Memory, emotion, attention, identity, and perception constantly influence one another. What you notice is shaped by who you believe yourself to be, often long before conscious thought catches up. This changes the conversation completely. Forgetting someone's name is not proof that you are lazy or unintelligent. In many cases, it reflects where your psychological energy has been invested during the encounter rather than what your brain is capable of remembering. Adler observed that people are deeply motivated by their need for significance and belonging. When those needs become active, even subtly, they can dominate awareness. The mind shifts from observing the other person to monitoring the self. Think about meeting your partner's family for the first time. You hear introductions, but your thoughts are racing. Are they judging me? Do I sound confident? Am I making a good impression? Hours later, you remember every awkward feeling but almost none of the names. The same thing happens at work. A new manager introduces an entire team. Instead of absorbing each introduction, your attention circles around your own performance. You wonder whether your ideas will be respected or whether you've already made a poor first impression. On social media, this pattern becomes even stronger. We scroll through countless faces while unconsciously comparing careers, appearances, lifestyles, and achievements. The mind becomes preoccupied with measuring itself, leaving little space to truly register the identities of others. This is not selfishness in the ordinary sense. It is often self-protection. The unconscious believes that monitoring your own social safety is more urgent than remembering another person's name. It sacrifices connection in order to preserve security. Freud might have described this as the ego defending itself from discomfort. Jung would have gone further, suggesting that these moments expose the hidden relationship between the conscious self and the shadow, the parts of ourselves we fear others might discover. The deeper truth is unsettling. The more intensely we become absorbed in protecting our identity, the less available we become to experience the people standing directly in front of us. Attention narrows, memory weakens, and genuine presence quietly disappears. But this raises an even more important question. If the unconscious learned to prioritize self-protection over connection, where did it first learn that the world was a place where being seen mattered more than truly seeing others? To answer that question, we have to travel much further back than adulthood. Long before you entered workplaces, friendships, or romantic relationships, your mind was already learning what deserved attention and what was necessary for emotional survival. As children, we do not simply absorb information. We absorb emotional patterns. Every interaction teaches the nervous system what keeps us safe, accepted, and loved. Those lessons become invisible rules that continue operating decades later without asking for permission. If a child grows up in an environment where mistakes are criticized, approval is unpredictable, or affection depends on performance, the mind quickly develops a habit of self-monitoring. It learns that paying attention to itself is more important than freely observing the world. Even in loving homes, this pattern can emerge. A sensitive child who constantly tries to read a parent's mood may become exceptionally skilled at scanning emotional signals. Their attention becomes trained on invisible tension rather than concrete details like names, dates, or introductions. Over time, this way of paying attention becomes automatic. As adults, they walk into a room and instinctively ask unconscious questions. Do I belong here? Am I saying the right thing? Does this person like me? The mind is busy answering those questions before it ever considers storing a stranger's name. The tragedy is that this strategy once served an important purpose. It helped the child navigate uncertainty. It reduced emotional risk. It created a sense of control in situations that felt unpredictable. But what protected the child can quietly limit the adult. This hidden defense mechanism often goes unnoticed because it feels normal. You believe you are simply being thoughtful or careful, unaware that a large portion of your attention has been consumed by an internal conversation that never truly ends. Greek mythology offers a powerful image of this pattern through the story of Narcissus. Most people believe the myth is merely about vanity, but psychologically, it speaks to something far deeper. Narcissus became so captivated by his own reflection that the living world around him slowly disappeared. Modern psychology reveals a similar danger, though usually in a quieter form. We may not stare into a pool of water, but we can become trapped inside our own reflection. Our fears, our image, our perceived flaws, and our endless evaluation of ourselves. The result is the same. Other people become blurred, not because they lack importance, but because our attention has been captured elsewhere. This is why forgetting names is sometimes less about poor memory than about divided presence. The unconscious is not refusing to remember another person. It is working tirelessly to manage an internal reality that feels more urgent than the external one. And this is where everything begins to change. Because once self-protection becomes your default way of relating to the world, it quietly creates psychological traps that extend far beyond forgotten names, influencing your confidence, your relationships, and even the identity you believe you must protect. The first trap is believing that remembering names is purely a cognitive skill. But beneath the behavior often lies an emotional pattern. When the unconscious is occupied with self-protection, memory becomes a secondary priority, even if you desperately want to appear attentive. Imagine attending a friend's wedding, where dozens of introductions happen within minutes. You leave feeling exhausted, convinced your memory failed you. In reality, much of your mental energy was spent wondering how you were being perceived instead of fully experiencing each encounter. The long-term consequence is subtle but powerful. Every forgotten name becomes more evidence that something is wrong with you. The embarrassment strengthens your self-consciousness, making the next introduction even more psychologically demanding than the last. The second trap is mistaking familiarity for genuine connection. We often assume that because we've spoken with someone several times, their identity has naturally settled into memory. Yet without emotional presence, familiarity remains surprisingly shallow. This appears in workplaces every day. You recognize faces in the hallway for months, exchange polite greetings, and still hesitate when introducing them to someone else. The relationship exists on the surface, while true psychological engagement never fully develops. Over time, this weakens trust in yourself. You begin avoiding situations where names matter. You hesitate to introduce people, avoid networking events, or hope someone else speaks first. What began as a forgotten detail slowly shapes your behavior and limits your confidence. The third trap is the fear of making another mistake. After enough embarrassing moments, the unconscious starts anticipating failure before it happens. Ironically, this anticipation steals even more attention from the present moment. Picture yourself entering a meeting already thinking, "Don't forget anyone's name this time." And instead of listening, you are monitoring your own performance. The pressure itself becomes the distraction, and the very outcome you fear becomes more likely. Psychologists have long observed that anxiety narrows attention. The mind focuses on avoiding danger rather than absorbing experience. In social situations, the imagined danger is often rejection, humiliation, or appearing incompetent rather than any physical threat. The fourth trap is reducing people to roles instead of identities. When life becomes busy, the unconscious begins organizing others into categories: the cashier, the manager, the neighbor, the client. Roles are easier to process than individual human beings. This efficiency comes at a hidden cost. The more people become functions in your mental world, the less emotionally distinctive they become. Without emotional distinction, memory struggles to create lasting connections, and names fade almost as quickly as they arrive. Perhaps the deepest trap of all is believing this pattern defines who you are. You begin introducing yourself as someone who is simply terrible with names, as though it were a permanent personality trait rather than a learned psychological habit. That belief quietly closes the door to change. Every new experience is filtered through an old identity, and the unconscious faithfully produces the behavior that identity expects. The cycle continues, not because it cannot be broken, but because it is rarely questioned. Yet awareness changes everything. The moment you recognize that forgetting names may reflect unconscious attention rather than personal inadequacy, shame begins to loosen its grip. You stop fighting yourself and start becoming curious about your own mind. And that curiosity is where genuine transformation begins. This is where the journey turns inward. The goal is no longer to force yourself into having a better memory. It is to understand where your attention lives. When attention changes, memory often follows without the struggle you once believed was necessary. Step 1 begins with replacing performance with presence. The old belief says, every introduction is a test you must pass. The healthier perspective sees every introduction as an opportunity to meet another human being rather than defend your own identity. Before focusing on the name, notice your own mind. Is it worrying about being impressive? Is it replaying a previous mistake? Simply recognizing these thoughts weakens their influence. Awareness interrupts the unconscious habit of turning every social interaction into self-evaluation. Imagine meeting a new colleague. Instead of silently asking whether they will like you, become curious about them. Listen to the rhythm of their voice, notice their enthusiasm, and allow genuine interest to replace internal performance. Presence naturally gives memory something meaningful to attach itself to. The psychological lesson is simple but profound. People become memorable when they become emotionally real. Your mind rarely remembers information in isolation. It remembers experiences that carry authentic attention. Step 2 is learning to slow the pace of your inner world. Modern life rewards speed, but the unconscious cannot form meaningful connections while constantly rushing between thoughts, notifications, and future worries. Think about how often introductions happen while your phone vibrates, your calendar feels full, or your mind is already planning tomorrow. Even when your eyes face another person, your attention may still be somewhere else. Memory cannot fully develop where presence never arrives. Viktor Frankl believed that between stimulus and response lies a space where freedom exists. In social encounters, that small space allows you to choose curiosity instead of automatic self-protection. It may last only a few seconds, but those seconds transform the quality of attention. The lesson is not to become perfect, it is to become available. The mind remembers far more when it is no longer racing ahead of the present moment. Step 3 asks you to redefine what forgetting means. The old belief interprets every forgotten name as proof of failure. The healthier perspective treats it as information about your current state of mind rather than a verdict about your worth. When you inevitably forget a name again, resist the urge to criticize yourself. Instead, ask a different question. Where was my attention? What was I feeling? What part of me was trying to stay safe? These questions create understanding instead of shame. Over time, this practice uncovers patterns. You may notice that names disappear most often when you feel intimidated, exhausted, distracted, or eager to be accepted. What once seemed random begins revealing a consistent psychological story. The final lesson reaches beyond memory itself. Every act of genuine attention is also an act of connection. As your unconscious learns that the world is not always a place of judgment, it gradually releases the need to constantly monitor your own reflection. In that quiet shift, remembering names becomes less about training the brain and more about learning the rare art of being fully present with another person. In the end, this conversation was never truly about names. It was about attention, identity, and the invisible stories the unconscious tells you about what matters most. Every forgotten name was quietly pointing toward a deeper pattern waiting to be understood. Life has a way of revealing what occupies the mind. Some people collect achievements but forget moments. Others remember every disappointment, yet overlook the kindness offered to them each day. The unconscious always leaves clues about where our psychological energy has been invested. Perhaps that is why so many people feel lonely despite speaking with countless others. They have mastered conversation, but not presence. They hear words without fully meeting the person behind them, while others experience the same distance in return. Jung believed that until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Those words are not merely philosophical. They are an invitation to notice the hidden forces shaping ordinary moments that seem too small to matter. The remarkable truth is that transformation rarely begins with dramatic breakthroughs. It begins when you stop asking, why is my memory so bad? And start asking, what is my mind trying to protect? That single shift replaces judgment with curiosity, and curiosity opens the door to lasting change. As you become more aware of your inner world, something unexpected happens. The need to constantly evaluate yourself begins to soften. Conversations become less about proving your worth and more about discovering another person's humanity. Presence quietly replaces performance. You may still forget a name from time to time. That is part of being human. But you will no longer mistake an occasional lapse for a flaw in your character. Instead, it becomes a gentle reminder to return your attention to the only place where genuine connection can exist, the present moment. When we remain trapped inside our own fears, we miss countless opportunities to truly know the people around us. And perhaps the greatest regret is not forgetting someone's name, but forgetting to be fully present while they were standing right in front of us. So the next time you meet someone, notice where your attention goes before you try to remember what they are called. You may discover that the deepest memory is not created by effort, but by genuine human presence. If this exploration helped you recognize something hidden within yourself, share your thoughts in the comments. Your experience may become the insight that helps someone else understand their own mind. And if you enjoy thoughtful explorations of psychology, identity, and the unconscious, consider subscribing so we can continue uncovering the patterns that quietly shape our lives. Until next time, pay attention not only to what your mind remembers, but also to what it chooses to notice. Sometimes the smallest moments reveal the deepest truths, and those quiet discoveries have the power to change the way you see yourself and everyone you meet.